Hello, welcome to Cafecito Sin Mapa Unmapped Coffee Chats. I'm Jacqueline, your host, and today is our season finale. We are going to go down memory lane, go through some of the things that I've learned, where we came from, where we're going. Maybe I'll throw some life updates and we'll just see what the chat turns into. I am filming this in the evening, so I don't have coffee, but figured I would go with a nice little Coke for today. So, if y'all remember, we started the podcast because I got really passionate about just like voices and visibility to all the different identities and labels that make people who they are. And it all started because I went to see Real Women Have Curves and just like became obsessed with their story and what they were really showing in the show, right? It was more than just women of all different shapes and sizes. It was women of all different countries that found similarities. It was immigrant experience. It was the difference between being first generation versus being like firstborn and even being like an actual immigrant yourself. And it was just a lot of intertwined identities, and just I found it to be quite fascinating, and that's where this whole podcast came from. And I started off with interviewing a lot of my friends. I'm hoping that you guys like kind of notice the progression of my like interview style changing from being with my friends. I interviewed it was Gia, Katie, Effie, Erica, and my cousin Clarissa. And these are all people that I obviously know and talk to on a regular basis. And I learned that sometimes it's a lot harder to interview people you know than interviewing people you don't know, because it's a lot harder to like remember context to stories, because like I know them, but you as listeners may not know some of the context to things that are brought up in conversation. So that was a really big learning curve for me. Also, just like playing with audio and playing with editing and how we push content and what works and what doesn't, and how like labeling things with certain titles on like Spotify work very differently versus sometimes certain title configurations made a huge difference on YouTube. And so there's just a lot that was learned aside from just interviewing styles and like the tech setup, but also just the whole platform of podcast as a whole. So I do want to say thank you so much for everyone who's listened and who has like been here along the ride and who like jumped into the middle of the season and kind of followed along since then. I am honestly just like so grateful for people listening to me yap and just sharing people's stories. I appreciate my friends for being so open to letting me interview them. Some of them were like really nervous about having these conversations, and I know some really just did it because I asked. So it's not lost on me that you guys shared your stories with me purely because you love me, and I love you so much for showing up for me and supporting me in this endeavor. I also want to say that I learned so much from just getting to talk to people that I didn't know, from being from supporting Real Women Have Curves. I got to be in contact with Sandra Balls, and though I didn't get to interview her this season, we have been in contact, and I'm hoping that we'll get her for season 2. She just has a crazy schedule, but I did get to talk to Claudia. She is the Cuban actress, singer, songwriter, and I got to interview her. I've seen some of her work now. I got to, like, besides Real Women Have Curves, she put on a production for Conce de Cuba, and I went and sat front row, watched, and had a phenomenal time supporting her. I got to meet Erica with an A. She is someone who has been friends with Katie for a while, and getting to talk to her and meet her, connect with her, were just like virtual friends now, and love chatting with her on Instagram. So really cool just learning her experience as a Muslim convert, and it being such a different world, specifically with not just converting, but being a Mexican woman who converted. I think that story is not always talked about, though it is a topic that is, I think, growing and being spoke of a lot more now. I also got to talk to Nikita. If y'all remember, Nikita is a Black American woman who I got to interview, and she also talked a little bit about her transgender experience. And I think that was really eye-opening, because there's a lot of disparities and just like changes there. And the fact that she's lived in a world as a Black man in America and a Black woman in America, and seeing that the difference there is truly just the gender, and how people are truly treat women vastly different than they treat men. I think just goes to show that there's still a lot of work to be done in, I think, women empowerment and just women visibility overall. I got to interview Meg. Oh my God. Okay, so all these people, up until everyone else I've talked about, I found somehow through like another friend, or I was at an event that I like saw them, and that's how I reached out. Meg was the first person that I really like didn't have any connections with. I just found her on TikTok and really liked her content. And she talks a lot about her experience as surviving with CPTSD, and all of the different things that have played into her story. And I decided to just like slide into her DMs, and she responded. And now I love to like chat with her too, and try to keep up with where she is. I think if you remember, she does have a brain tumor that induces epilepsy. So she's just had a lot of going on medically. So I really hope that she gets the help that she needs, but also just love watching her content still, and how she shows up aside from just having all these medical issues and having a world of trauma that I think already make it really, really hard for people to show up in the world, and yet she's such a light. I just adore her, and didn't get to talk to her much, but still, I became such a fan of her immediately. Getting to chat with her, because we did chat a while, like on and off camera, after and before the actual interview. So it was really nice just getting to like chat with her, get to know her as a person, build those connections, and just see how like another thing that I really found fascinating. And sorry, I'm rambling because I am talking to myself basically. It was so fascinating getting to see how people would like open up a little bit more throughout the conversations. And even from when I first started the interview to like the end of our conversations, people just seemed so much more relaxed. They felt more comfortable. And even from like when they first dropped on the call, we always spent a few minutes, even if it was like 15 to 30 minutes, just talking and getting to know each other. And that alone really made people feel comfortable. And it worked with Selena. Selena is a childhood friend of mine, grew up with her. We know each other, and she was still really nervous to do the interview, and getting to talk to her. We talked for like a good 30 minutes, maybe even more with her actually, before we even started recording. And that alone made her feel so much more comfortable. And then like an hour in, she was letting loose and feeling so much more comfortable in the conversation too. So it just goes to show that I think people like conversation, and it always takes some time to feel comfortable and to share things. And I love being able to provide the platform for that, and that people felt comfortable doing that with me. And the listeners. So I'm just honestly so grateful for that. I also, let's see, who else did I interview? I also thought that it was really wonderful, though you guys didn't get to hear my coworker's experience, as it was one of the first podcast I dropped of my friend who is a lesbian, mass prisoning woman. She's a mother, and just sharing her experience, and then in the end, us having to pull the podcast because she genuinely felt scared for her family and what it could do in today's society. Again, just goes to show that we have so much progress to make in the world, and that we have so many stories that need to be said, and that the people that are able to say it need to be able to share, because there's people that are directly affected and you can't talk about it because the repercussions will come to you tenfold. So I think that was a huge driver for me to continue to push and try to have conversations with people, regardless if they wanted to be on the podcast or not, just for myself to learn and be able to relay their message, I think is huge. And I'd like to do a little bit more of that, which takes me to kind of where I'm headed here. And I actually, before I even do that, there's one more person I can talk about. Riza. She was the last person I interviewed, and pay the players with Riza's signature. I found her at a basketball game, and really I had seen her content on TikTok first, then found her up there, and we've watched a lot of the playoff games together. And so it's really cool that this has like flourished into a friendship, that I now have a friendship that started with the podcast and started with basketball, and has just kind of developed even further. That podcast episode alone taught me so much. I tried doing in person, and the mics weren't working. If you recall, audio was crazy, recovering it, having to do like the piecemealing of segments to try and recover and even put out the episode, because I felt so bad and didn't want her make her redo it. Getting to talk to Sadie's Ward and Stephanie, who owns Sadie's Ward, and her giving us access to showing up early and recording there. Like, there's a lot that goes into putting out episodes, specifically when it's in person, and I would love to do more of it. I also would like to be able to have more time to really curate the content, so that I don't fall back on this situation again of missing audio or missing or having troubleshoot and all that stuff. So that takes me to why I decided to do the season ending now. I feel like we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. My friend Julie, who does a lot of the production and like editing and stuff, has learned a lot. We've learned a lot about just the industry of podcasting. And I also feel like we've gone back and forth with, stick with me here. The podcast is called Cafecito Sin Mapa because it gave tribute to myself. I am first generation Mexican American. Spanish was my first language. I love traveling. I love coffee. And the name just was so fitting and easy for me to pick. It does make it harder having a Spanish name and having English content and having just like all people represented on this platform and on this podcast. And I had originally thought to go dive in specific to Latin and Hispanic women. And I just felt like there was so much more that needed to be talked about. And that's why I opened it to everyone else. that was another challenge that was brought because of the name and people thinking that it was a Spanish podcast. So it kind of drove away some viewers and listeners purely from the lack of context there. And as I've gone through, and let me preface, I am so, so dang thankful for everyone who listened and everyone who shared their story. And I would never take away the season. It was such a needed learning curve, experience builder, and just like, yeah, I mean, it was a pilot season, and it really is that you learn so much and you grow so much from it. But I think that in today's society, where we are, and just like our political climate, and just in general, it makes more sense to really focus in on Hispanic voices and Latin voices specifically. I still want to focus on sharing women's stories, so I will still continue to interview women. I am thinking I'm just going to hone in deeper and find more women who are Latin or Hispanic, whether that be first generation, whatever form it is. And I'm just trying to find, I just want to use the name, the platform, and everything, and kind of hone into that piece of it being the intersection of being a woman, being being Latin, and then anything else that, any other labels or identities that people identify with. And the reason I obviously want to do that is because it apparently is, Latin voices are the most underrepresented voice in media and in workforce representation overall. So I think that if I'm trying to amplify voices, I should be trying to amplify the voices of my community. And I think there's obviously a lot of gender biases. We have not just the misogyny that comes with society as a whole, but I think if you're focusing in just like Latin countries, there is a lot of like machismo there. So again, another reason why I think female voices need to be amplified. And Latin females are the second largest female group in the US. So there's a lot of us here, and yet we're still dealing with like wage disparity, lack of representation. And I really think that it's time that I focus on that. I really want to find the people and the voices, the stories to share, whether it's blue collar working women, white collar service workers. A lot of Latin women are service workers, and I'd love to spend some time talking to them and interviewing them and sharing their stories. So that is really where I'm headed with this next. And I decided to make it a season in so that we can really focus on outreach, booking people to interview, and maybe actually spend time interviewing them in person, and having the time to really curate the conversation and work with them and collaborate with places to be able to record in person without the timeline of having to rush and put something out because we're working on a week to week it. So it just seemed like a perfect time to put a pause in it and make it a season end and tell you guys where we're headed next, and give me some time to put all that together and really dive in to the curation of it, and provide better and bigger and more meaningful content in next season. So that is where we are. I think, God, aside from just the podcast evolution being a huge thing, you guys heard me go from starting the podcast in July, that turning into, I dropped the first episode in June. So dropping the podcast, that turning into my public coming out as being a bi woman, wasn't expecting that, but that's what happened. Um, in July, right before I turned 30, I was laid off. I started a new job. I was dating. I also, that dating didn't go anywhere. Um, Interviewed, quit therapy. Like, there's been so much that's happened while I've also been trying to do the podcast. And it's been all, I got into women's basketball. I met my favorite influencers, Tracy and Cheryl. I've also gotten to meet a lot of other followers of theirs. We're called the TC fam, and so now I have friends from the TC fam. I have a lot of friends in the WNBA now, and like other people that follow the W, and it's just all blossomed in a very beautiful way all at the same time. And I couldn't be more thankful to have that progression also just kind of sprinkled into the podcast, because it really is like a timeline of what the last few months of my life have been like, and it's been quite the roller coaster. Yeah, so thank you everyone for sticking with me, for being a part of it, for listening, for supporting, sharing, liking, commenting, sending people my way, and for being so like just generous with your time, and also for being easy on me, because I don't think anyone's been mean so far on like the podcast. And even though, again, I know that last one with Riza was rough to listen to because of the audio, people have still been like really kind, and I just appreciate it. I think that in a world that there is so much hate right now, people are still showing a lot of love too, and it's good and important to like really focus on that. And I say that as because I've been so big into women's basketball. I've been posting a lot, going to Wilka's bar. It's a women's sports bar in the Lower East Side, and my TikTok got on the wrong side of the algorithm, and I ended up on very like racist, misogynist side of TikTok. And the comments on the videos are ridiculous. People just hating on women's basketball, but not just that, but the hating on women's sports, hating on the fact that it's a predominantly black women's sport that's played. That was mentioned. The fact that nobody's watching, people saying just really, really rude comments, and it all being very misogynist and racist. And it makes me laugh because people are taking the time to comment those things, and I'm no better than them. I am commenting back because it's entertaining, but also trying to remember that that is a big part of the world we live in. But aside from that, there's also a lot of people that are celebratory and embracing the newfound like boom that the W is taking on, and the trajectory that it's going on, and the fact that a lot of people are supporting the W, and it is doing so much better. And just again, visibility, representation matters. People are going to always come out of the woodworks and have something to say regardless, because they are new things. And again, visibility and representation really matter, and that is exactly why, because people will clap back and be nasty, and so voices are usually toned down, kind of shy away from it, and that's not really what we're gonna do here. So I think that's just what I'm going to end it with, is that I'm not silencing my voice. I'm working on amplifying it and amplifying other Latin women, and whether it be businesses, they're just stories and intersection of other identities, and while also being part of the Latin community and Latin community. Also, I'm saying Latin because it's gender inclusive. I know I talk about like women visibility, but I also would want to open the platform for anybody who is like non-binary. So that's that. And also saying Latin because Learned the other day, there's a lot of people who do not identify with Hispanic, or sorry, yeah, Hispanic, because one, it only includes Spanish speaking countries, but it also is linked to Spanish heritage, um, which you might think, what's the problem? It's actually linked to like Spanish colonization, and people, we don't really want to identify with colonization. So, um, there's that little piece of education there. And yeah, so what am I doing next after this? I'm still focused on the W. I'm actually going to a petition on pay the players this weekend, that I get to be a part of with Riza actually, and really gonna start diving into finding Latin voices. So if you know anybody who is a part of the community, please send them my way. If they're willing and able to share their story, or even just want to have a conversation, let me share their story. Happy to do that. Any ideas on the crossovers that you want to hear, whether it's, I'm thinking like, I haven't talked to a Latin Jew. I think Jewish women are not typically like what you think of in the Latin community, and that would be a really interesting conversation, and talking to just women in different workforces. And there's so many different where there's so many different ways we can go with this, and I'm here to explore it all, with the highlight of being pushing Latin voices and keeping my beautiful name of Cafecito Sin Mapa. So with that, I'm gonna sign off for this season. Again, thank you so much for being here, supporting me. So the content on social media will be down a little bit. I'll still be like sharing and reposting content as I find it, and during this like off season time, but we won't be putting out stuff every single day as we have been. But stay tuned, please follow along, and season 2, come back for more.